What's up guys, it's Mr. Lili Bubba, and I'm here with something I haven't done in a while, a Pokemon Showdown Battle. Now, I am running a fairly unconventional team, but let's go ahead and just get into it without any explanation. So, I am going to go ahead and lead off with my Landorus Therian as my opponent leads off with Rotom Wash. So I was thinking this thing was Scarfed, so I decided to go out into my Clawitzer because I'm actually running a Scarfed Clawitzer. And if he does go for the Hydro Pump, it also wouldn't do much. And that's what ends up happening. He goes for the Hydro Pump, and it does nothing to my Clawitzer. So I decide to switch out again, knowing now that this thing is defensive into Cryogonal, which is part of the reason why I have this thing is so that it can wall defensive Rotom Wash and even trick Rotom Wash. So basically, as long as it's not Specs, I can handle it pretty well. So he goes for the Thunderbolt and then switches out into his Sylveon, and I go for the Toxic on the Sylveon, which is a good thing to have poisoned. Really, it makes it just a little bit less tanky. And so I switch out into pretty much an obvious play with my Metagross, which is also one of the most predictable things on my team, I think, being the obvious Mega with nothing else having the capability on my team other than Latias. And so my opponent goes back out into the Rotom Washes. I believe I go for a Meteor Mash, hoping for a attack boost, but I end up not getting it, so I just decide to switch out as he gets his Wish back from Sylveon. And since I see that here, I believe I end up predicting that to happen again later. But anyway, I go back out into my Cryogonal as he goes for the Shadow Ball. Fortunately, he does not get the Spadef drop. And I go for, I believe, a Freeze Dry, because I predict him to switch out. And if he goes out into something that can take the poison, then that would suck. So I decided to go for the Freeze Dry, because everything on his team can be frozen. So I go for it. I don't get the freeze, but I do a decent chunk to this Sableye, which I notice here in the turns coming up, very oddly, is actually a stall Sableye. I don't know if that was an accident or what was going on, why this Sableye doesn't run Prankster, but he goes for the Fake Out there. And I was thinking he was going to go for a burn, and I just decided that Landorus was really the thing on my team to take a burn. I could have gone out into Latias, I suppose, but just in case it had T-Wave, I didn't want my Latias to be paralyzed. So he confuses my Landorus. I decide to stay in and go for the knockoff again. I originally just went for the knockoff to get his leftovers off of Sableye and make it a bit more manageable. But since this Landorus is confused, I don't want to give this Gallade a chance to bulk up, because that would basically ruin my entire team. But I misclick here. I mean to go out into Metagross, predicting an Ice Punch, and I actually go out into Latias on an Ice Punch, and I get frozen. So the misclick and the hacks sort of combine there, and basically fuck over my Latias. I really wanted to get a chance to use this Specs Latias, but he brings in his Crobat, goes for Pursuit, and ends up killing it after the misclick switch in and the freeze hacks. So seeing that this Crobat is using some move type things, I decided to go out into my Landorus to get the Intimidate. In retrospect, maybe not the best play. I should have saved the Landorus switch for this Gallade, but regardless, I go for the U-turn on the switch out into Gallade, and I'm going to go out into Talonflame because I'm thinking Ice Punch, Close Combat, either one of them, not really going to hurt me, but he ends up switching out, which is kind of odd. As I go for the Brave Bird, it's resisted, so it does not do that much at all. Or why was I saying this switch out was odd? Anyway, I decide to switch out of this Rotom, obviously, back into Cryogonal, because as long as this thing is alive, I can sit here and take hits all day. That Hydro Pump does do a solid 40%, though. So I am going to have to go for the Recover, as I believe he switches back out into his Gallade. I think wanting to go for a close combat on this Cryogonal, obviously, because this thing cannot take physical hits in the slightest. This thing has very good special defense, but its physical defense is about 30. So, not too good there. Even with max HP investment, it would obviously not be living a close combat. So I switch out into my Landorus, and he does go for the predictable move with the close combat, which is pretty nice because now he is sitting at -1 in attack, defense, and special defense. So he really can't do much to me as I go ahead and go for the double switch into Metagross, predicting the Ice Punch, and he does go for the Ice Punch. Fortunately, doesn't get the freeze again. Sorry, and does nothing. So I decide to go for the Meteor Mash, which I don't know how I didn't outspeed. Honestly, I think I shouldn't have outsped a max speed Gallade, so I don't know what set he was using. But anyway, I go out into my Cryogonal, and seeing as this thing has Thunderbolt, I'm just sort of hoping that I don't get paralyzed or Spadef dropped from the Shadow Balls. I'm basically just hoping he goes for a Hydro Pump on all of those switches. But I am able to get off a Freeze Dry, and it does a shit ton of damage to this thing as he goes for the T-Bolt. Doesn't get the Paralysis, and here he makes a play that I'm not really too sure of. I don't know why my opponent would go out into Crobat on a Freeze Dry. I really had no reason to not go for Freeze Dry again, and that just ends up doing a crap ton of damage. And we both get some HP back from lefties, and he stays in and goes for the Brave Bird. I honestly thought that he would go for a Pursuit, predicting the switch, but he doesn't, and I didn't think a Pursuit would kill. I thought I'd be able to kill with the Freeze Dry, but fortunately that doesn't happen. I end up losing my Cryogonal, so I have no safe switch into Rotom, which sucks, but I do have my Talonflame, which I believe can kill now with a Brave Bird from the range that it's at, but I get poison from a Cross Poison on this thing, but it ends up not really mattering because now that the Crobat's dead, and really now that the Gallade's dead, that's really the only threat that I saw on my opponent's team. And I go for the knockoff on this Rotom just to get some damage on it. I was thinking he'd go for the Hydro Pump. He doesn't. He actually goes for the Shadow Ball, probably predicting the switch into Metagross. Unfortunately, I don't switch into Metagross, but that actually ends up being a pretty costly play in the long run. You'll see here in a few turns in a transaction between Metagross and Rotom. So with Sylveon poisoned, I have really no reason to get Rocks up. I mean, if I do, then Rotom's dead upon entry, but it honestly doesn't really matter. I've basically got the game in the bag as long as I can deal with Sceptile, which I can obviously with Talonflame. And so I was predicting the Protect here after the Wish, I believe. Not exactly sure, but I go for the U-turn again, which was another misclick. Actually had multiple in this game. I meant to go for the Brave Bird and just get this Sylveon out of the way because I could have cleaned house with Talonflame. But my opponent goes for the Hyper Voice, does nothing to Metagross, and down goes his Sylveon, and he's only got his Rotom left. He brings in his Rotom, and I go for the Bullet Punch, and it doesn't kill. It does 9%. And then he goes for the Shadow Ball, does a crap ton, but not enough to kill me. So if I had actually switched into Metagross before, I would have taken a Shadow Ball prior to that, and I would basically be screwed. But now that I have priority on two Pokemon, I just decide to get a Bullet Punch off. I don't think Sceptile is going to set up. I think he's just going to go ahead and kill me, and he goes for the Dragon Claw. So he had my opponent had some very strange sets, but they weren't able to secure the victory. As I go out into the Talonflame, go for the Brave Bird, and end it off. So thank you guys for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more battles.